On Transit, the TV show On Transit that takes place on transit.
Today on Transit, we visit Portland, Oregon. We're going to talk with Mary Fetch, who's the Public Relations Director of TriMet, Portland's public transit agency. We also talk with Tim Burkhart, who used to live in Minneapolis, but now he lives in Portland. We also talk with Todd Bullinger, Senior Transportation Planner with the City of Vancouver, Washington.
I'm Mary Fetch. I'm the Director of Communications for TriMet in Portland. And we're on our MAX light rail train. We call it MAX. Stands for Metropolitan Area Express. And we've been running trains for almost 18 years. The system has changed since we started. The first line was 15 miles from downtown Portland to Gresham. And now it's 44 miles. It's 64 stations. So the system has expanded for total extension. So it's been a growing system. It's a very popular system. The second line opened in 1998, an 18-mile extension to the west. And what's interesting about that is when the voters voted on local funds for it, they voted over 70%. And it's interesting, when the first line opened, there were people who said, why are you even going to open it? Because no one will ride it. And it has actually been something that every year Ridership on MAX continues to grow. The system continues to grow. And what we see is when we open new lines, you don't just get those lines, area riders. You actually get people from other areas coming in because you're now connecting more people to more places. So we see that real connection is working, sort of a max factor, as we call it here. We had federal dollars back in the 70s that could have gone for this freeway, and people said, we don't want to do it that way. We want to go a different way. So could we change the federal highway dollars to transit dollars? We didn't want to devastate neighborhoods because, that's the foundation of a city, is your neighborhood. If you have strong neighborhoods, you really have a strong community and you have a strong region. So what we see here with the light rail, in addition to supporting the neighborhoods, was an option to help downtown. Downtown was just sort of clogged up with traffic, and there was a plan to revitalize downtown Portland. And this was a piece of it. This is downtown Portland. We're in the heart of it. This is called Pioneer Courthouse Square. It's what we call our living room. We have events here all the time. It's one of our busiest stations. It's really a public square. Now, before we opened the first line, this was a parking lot. And they were actually going to build a parking garage on it. Here you are in the heart of downtown Portland. Now, is that good land use strategy to build a parking lot in the middle of downtown? So the community opted for Pioneer Courthouse Square. So this is a place where people gather. It's an attractive place. It's the heart of the retail community.
My name is Tim Burkhart, and I grew up in Minneapolis and moved to Portland about 4 years ago. Portland, in terms of light rail, has a system built. Minneapolis has one line that's just open. I think people are looking at that first line wondering, well, is this really worth it? And I kind of always make the case that you have to think in terms of a system. And so Portland has that with the light rail. And as you know, they've got essentially 4 lines that are built, and now have the streetcar with plans to expand that. And sort of that all adds together to make it work.
I think one of the reasons light rail works in this region is because we have land use laws, and it says that we're going to grow in a compact area, and we're going to preserve farmland and forest land, and not just have wild sprawl like other communities have. Land use and transportation work together to provide people the options, the access, the mobility, and at the same time the livability around light rail stations. We look for more dense development. You look for mixed use. If you have an apartment building, you have retail on the main floor. So you really have the opportunity to take care of some of your errands, if you will. You can go to the ATM, you can drop off your dry cleaning, get a coffee, all at the same place, and you don't have to drive for every trip that you need. So it's really that thinking of, as we say here, we don't want to use a quart of gasoline to go get a quart of milk.
There's definitely, a culture, and again, in the central city where people like to do their shopping at the neighborhood businesses. And, it's not just a handful of lefty radicals that don't want to go to the mall. It is, there are more than that. There are people here that just, value that. Clearly, to have a good transit system, you have to have a good walking system because transit users are pedestrians. One thing that goes back to the very beginnings of Portland that makes it a walkable city is that, especially downtown, the blocks are small, 200-foot long blocks, which is much smaller than many cities, and it's at a pedestrian scale.
We see that within a half a mile of the stations that you see development and $3 billion worth of development along the entire line since the decision to build back in 1978. The development story is one of the Portland region's most proudest stories, but also just that connection. I mean, we see over 100,000 trips a day on this system. Over 300,000 trips a day in total for our bus and rail. People use the transit system not just to commute to work. There are some cities where that's what their system is based on. They take people to work and they take them home, and then after that it's pretty light ridership for the transit dependent. And we're actually seeing our highest ridership gains right now in that off-peak ridership and along what we call our frequent service lines. Service that comes at least every 15 minutes, 7 days a week. So it used to be like, let's say you could have a bus line that goes every 15 minutes. And on the weekends it would be half hour or hourly. That's really tough to plan your schedule around hourly service. But when we boosted it to 15 minutes, we saw double-digit ridership increases. So we see the ridership growing on both bus and rail, even during a recession when there's fewer people working. And we just think it's because people use it not just to work, but to go to doctor appointments, to go to events, concerts, community events, go visiting friends. It's really a fabric of the community.
You think of the most successful transit cities like big cities, New York, Chicago, Paris, etc. Portland is a smaller city and doesn't have the density, but the land use planning system has resulted in a denser Portland and denser metropolitan areas than they would have been without that system. And obviously that supports transit.
We're now on the West Side Line. We're now heading up into the tunnel. This is the second deepest tunnel in North America, and the second deepest is about 260 feet below the surface. This is a core sample of what we drilled through to build this tunnel. 16-million-year-old rock. And what we've done here is created part of the art feature also includes this timeline, but it's also this historical sense of it. And so this station has actually become sort of a destination in its own. The Airport Max project, it's an innovative project. People have asked how could we use private dollars to create a system. Bechtel Enterprises, a private company, came to the region and said, we know you have plans to build this at some point, maybe 10 years down the road. But if we build it, we contribute to the cost of it in exchange for development rights to 120 acres near the entrance to the airport. And we'd like to do a mixed-use development, hotels, conference rooms, conference centers, things like that. It costs $125 million, and much of it was already in a public right-of-way when they built I-205 freeway. Somebody was very, very smart and actually left an area for a transitway. Didn't know it was light rail at the time, but just left the space. We're right at the baggage claim area outside the south end of the airport. And that convenience, people just roll off and head out. About 3 times the number of people are riding the train to the airport than the bus that served the airport. Because it runs on the existing East Side line, You actually see more people riding just because there's now more trains in a very busy section of our service area. So yes, we saw people going to the airport and such, but we also saw increased ridership just on the existing line. The development piece of it is called Cascade Station, those 120 acres. And we opened the Airport Max line a day before 9/11 happened. And we were hit severely by a recession that has hampered the development at Cascade Station. One of the features on the train is a bike rack. We put 4 of these per car. Portland is considered one of the best bike cities in the country, and it has bike lanes. And there's actually state laws and local laws that say when you redo a street that you have to make it a bike lane.
The linkage between trains, light rail, and bicycles are much better than riding a bus, waiting for a bus, than riding a train. I can get home quicker by train and bike than I can by train and bus.
You know, we find that people will ride their bike, put it on the MAX train, finish part of their trip, and then go the rest of their way. Sometimes they're bypassing a freeway or an area that's not very accessible, and so so a lot of people mix it up: a little train, a little bike, a little bus.
Portland has been more forward-thinking in making sort of all the modes fit together in a limited amount of space, not always requiring the full lane width, for example, which is often a hang-up when you're trying to add bike lanes or have wider sidewalks. And now, as they're planning for the future, that's just part of the design guidelines when you build a street in Portland.
Today we have about 10 people, and we're leading a guided tour from Vancouver, Washington down to Portland, Oregon. Basically, it's a bicycle to transit access ride. How do you as a cyclist orient yourself through a transportation system that is typically set up for car drivers? Today's event is about a 3-hour ride showing people how to take their bikes across the bridge, how to cross safely, how to buy a train ticket. We're on the MAX currently, the new yellow line. How to load your bike onto the transit cars. From this point, our group is going to ride the train down to the Rose Quarter. We'll disembark and we'll show them the bicycle traffic signal. From there, we ride along the Willamette River. And what's unique about the Willamette pathway is that Portland has built a floating shared use path. In a sense, a floating trail.
It's called the East Bank Esplanade. It goes all the way down the river. It's a walkway. It's people run, they bike. Last extension we just did, the yellow line, is an amazing story. This is an area that has been long neglected, and when you see the investment of $350 million for this project, new sidewalks, new streets, 3 times the number of trees, artwork, and the commitment along with that from the city and our partners to do storefront improvements. There were about 100 businesses along this alignment when we started construction. There are now over 150 businesses. We worked exceedingly hard and creatively to come up with ways to support the businesses during construction. We actually built it differently. Instead of having the entire line under construction at one time, we worked in 3 to 4 block segments. You're in, you're out, you let them know. They can plan around that. So now we're along the interstate line. It's 5.8 miles long. What this street used to be was 2 auto lanes, and we took 1 lane, and we're in the middle of the right-of-way. a lot of the people would drive on interstate to avoid the freeway. So you saw a lot of cut through traffic. It felt like it was a drive-through area.
Really what they did is they, as they call it, put that road on a traffic diet. Took some of the lanes away and put in this case, a rail line down the middle of it. And so you see that street redesigned to be, aesthetically appealing. It's calmed in terms of traffic. It's got wide sidewalks. I believe it has bike lanes for part of the length.
This line, we actually saved about $3 million by being more environmentally sensitive. We reused concrete that we road base. We ground it up and shipped it back and put it back in. Actually, some of these bollard and chain you see here to keep people from crossing the track, these are made from, they're plastic, and they're made from recycled auto gas tanks. That, and we also have plastic recycled railroad ties embedded in the concrete here. We actually increased the level of pervious space on the system. We used artwork as part of the stormwater treatment system. Because it was a shipbuilding area during World War II and such, the art at this station features a ship's prow. It's reminiscent of it. The water falls in, comes down, and comes to this drain in the middle here, and then it goes over to and feeds this pocket park over here with the propeller. And so that's part of the runoff, and so it doesn't run into the Willamette River.
I know that for TriMet it was a challenge to design because it really does go at grade essentially down the middle of a street. Looking at that yellow line, it would be applicable to Minneapolis in terms of the proposed line down University Avenue. It's right there, it's sort of part of the street rather than being this separate line kind of tucked off behind the buildings or at the edge of the roadway. And so I think probably Minneapolis could look to that line from a design perspective and working with property owners and right-of-way issues for any lessons learned on how to put it into University Avenue.
Interstate Avenue used to be one of our most popular bus lines, and we're actually seeing tremendous increase on the line. Saturdays, Sundays, even weekdays, over 60-70% increase. And it's like, you had a bus line here. Why is it so busy? So very interesting. We just think that people really like the MAX system. They like the certainty of, they know where it's going. Some people get on a bus and go, I don't know where it's turning. I don't know, but they feel comfortable on a train. Well, I think every line we get better at it. When we started the East Side line and it opened in 1986, there was no public art program, for public works. When we opened the West Side in 1998, it was our first opportunity to add art, to sort of reflect the neighborhood and the communities around that station. The last station on the Yellow Line was a former internment camp, temporary internment camp for Japanese Americans during World War II. Over 3,600 people were there, and it was a former pavilion where they sold horses. And so they swept up the manure, laid down plywood, and called it a place for people to live. And the art at that station reflects that story. Everybody had to wear processing tags, and so the artist put Japanese timber gates up, and she has representative processing tags hanging from those timber gates to represent every person that was there. And around the legs of the timber gates, she has stories from the Oregonian newspaper at that time.
Public involvement is a given in the culture of Oregon for building public facilities, and it really keeps the professionals and the planners honest in terms of having to get feedback, going through that process, an open process, and trying to make the solution fit the context of where it's being built.
Well, the capital side, we've had good partnerships with the federal government. the East Side project was 83% federal funds. The West Side line was 75% federal funds. We built our airport line with public and private funds. And then with the interstate line, the federal government paid 72%, something like that. And part of that reason it's so high is because we built the airport line with our own money and used that as a local match, a one-time match. Right now we're proposing 2 lines that with a 60% share of federal dollars. The rest of the local funds, a portion of it comes from all the partners along the alignment help contribute, the city of Portland. So it's usually a mix, usually not state dollars. Haven't used state dollars since the West Side, so we've built 2 projects without state dollars. When TriMet was created 35 years ago, it was from a bankrupt transit district, just couldn't make money. So the legislature created TriMet and allowed us to have an employer payroll tax. So employers pay roughly $6.22 per $1,000 of gross payroll on their employees. And so that makes up about 2/3 of our operating funds. The fare box makes up about 20-25%. So then you make up a balance with operating grants and things like that. And we actually just had it approved by the business community. They support it as well as the legislature to allow the board, our board of directors, to increase the rate over the next 10 years to a total of 0.1%. So that we could pay to operate these new extensions. We have a Washington County commuter rail line that's on board and in the design phase. We have these 2 rail projects, and you have to prove to the federal government that you can operate something for 20 years. You have an operating stream for that. And so they said, yeah, we'll do that. They understood the value of transit. So that was a good reinforcement of the importance and what transit really brings to a community. I mean, we take over about 200,000 car trips a day are taken off our streets because of our bus and our MAX system. Can you imagine what our community would look like if all those trips were actually made in those cars? The air quality, the congestion. Some people say, well, does light rail solve congestion? I think it provides an option. It relieves congestion. I don't think anyone anywhere will say, I have the solution for traffic congestion. We find about 77% of our riders are what we call choice riders. They have a car or choose not to own a car so they can rely on the transit system. That's much different than when you go to other communities like a Los Angeles may have 75% of their ridership is transit dependent. So it really is, it validates that this is a system that people don't have to take, but they take it.
The light rail system in Portland has been here almost 20 years since they built the first line. And that's been long enough that it really does connect key destinations. And so you find that it takes you where you want to go, but there's been enough time that new development has happened, and Portland's been very intentional about encouraging new development, transit-oriented development around the light rail. But it's really having that fixed system that's there, it's going to be there next year and the year after if you're looking to put money into, development or just to buy a house. I think that's really a difference from the bus system, and we all know that, there's sort of a bias sometimes among users that people just like the rail because it's neat and it's new and it's fun. Which I would agree with, even though I'm a bus user too. I love riding on the rail. But I think you find that fixed route does have an economic development angle that a bus route simply doesn't have. And it's, best exemplified in Portland with the streetcar. That's almost as much an economic development tool as it is a transit tool. Looking at the big picture in Minneapolis versus Portland, it's really that, 20 years of having a fixed route system that is truly a system that really sets them apart, and I can see Minneapolis getting there if they're continuing to be successful with the light rail.
I get calls like from you and from media folks around the country, even, in other countries. How did Portland do it? You know, we keep hearing Portland builds it right. And how do you do that? Number one, it's regional in the sense of if you have to have the entire region at the table making these decisions. The funding decisions, the location, the alignment, all those things have to be done regionally. And with the land use laws that direct how development happens, how growth happens. Growth is going to happen. So the question is, how do you do it? How does it reflect the community? And how do you manage it so that you have some control over it? And when you think about a viable community, I think you need to look at, it starts with the pedestrian. Can you get there? Is it someplace somebody wants to walk? If it's where people walk, that means there are services nearby. It's mixed use. So that you can do those errands at the same time. You know, that's one of the benefits of the transit tracker too. You look up and go, oh, I have 5 minutes till my train comes. Oh, I'll step across the street, I'll get a coffee, I'll get an ATM, and you know, I'll drop off, oh, there's a little deli, I'll pick up something. So you think all those things were done without driving. And it's not that we're against the car, it's how do you make it so that the community is vibrant and that you don't have to drive to every location. You know, transit's not for everybody, it's not for every trip. So the question is, on those trips that it works for and people take it, does it connect them to the places where they need to go?
It really has a success to build on, and alternate modes of transportation are definitely part of the culture of the central city.
We're part of the backbone of the community. We're part of the signature. Whenever you see the news intros to the shows, whenever you see a travel magazine, they come and say, oh, go visit here, this is a tourist attraction, but also ride the transit system. People use it and it works. So I'm really glad I live here.